In this tutorial, I'm going to be going over parts. Parts are necessary for just about any kind of game. So it's important to know what a part is and how to make it look like what you want and do the things you want. So basically what a part is, if I just add one here, it's just basically a shape. So pretty much anything in the workspace that you're seeing is going to be made out of a part. So there's a lot of different properties to parts. There's different shapes of parts. I can add a block part, which is just this rectangular one here, even though it looks like a cube here. But don't worry, you can just change the shape of it as you want. Then you can add a sphere part, or a wedge, a corner wedge, and a cylinder. For now, I'll just be working with this part right here. And you can also change the shape down here. So probably the one you're going to be using the most is going to be the block part. This could be anything for like a building, or like stairs, a road. There's a lot of different things you can make with just a block part. So let's just start at the top here, looking at the properties. Or actually, before we even do that, let's just run the game and see what happens with this part. So if I run the game, you can see the part is here, but that's pretty much it. Can't really do anything with it. I can just kind of walk over it, and it kind of exists here, and that's about it. I mean, that's all you really need a part for anyway. Most of the time anyway, you don't want your parts just kind of moving around randomly. So it basically does the job. It's just more of like, what kind of part do you want? What do you want it to look like? But yeah, maybe you want some parts to move around or do different things like that. So yeah, let's just start at the top here. So here we can change the brick color. So all the parts will use this property called brick color, whereas other things in the game might use a color, but it won't be called brick color. It'll be called something else. So that's how you know you're dealing with the part, is if it has this brick color property. You can also change the color here if you want a more precise color. Or if you just want to pick from the color palette here. And then here I can just move the part up. Or I can select it here. Here I can scale it. Here I can rotate it. And then this will make it so the part will collide with other things. So this is only for when you're editing and adding things. This doesn't actually change how anything works in the game. But you can see if I turn it on, I can't move it down any farther because these parts are colliding with each other. But if I turn this off, then it can go through it. But again, this is only when I'm editing it. So if I were to run it like this, you can see it'll just stay right here. Join surfaces. This is a new thing. Actually, I'm not really too sure what this does. This is a new feature. but it just sounds like it joined two parts together. And then there's two different modes here, geometric and physical. You almost always want to be in geometric. I actually don't even really know what the physical mode does, but I've never needed it, so it can't be too important. Okay, now going to the model tab here, we can view more things related to parts. So here we can rotate it. If we want to rotate it by a certain amount here, then we can do it like that. I can just change it here if I want to rotate it. I guess there'd be no point doing 360. That would just be the same. But if I want to do 180, so you can't really tell a difference, but it is rotating. Or if I want to do 30, just however much you want to rotate it. And then I can do the same thing with the movement. So if I just want to move it one stud at a time, so that way you can snap it so you can get more precise build-ins or whatever. And the same thing works with the scale-in. So if I have this checked on one stud and then I scale it, you see it'll also scale it by that amount. And then if I don't have anything here, it'll just will scale it very roughly. Okay, and then edit pivot here. This is something you usually don't really need to mess with, but if you want to. So here I'll just show you what this does. So I'm going to rotate this part on the x-axis like this. And you can see it's rotating by the center. It's rotating right in the center of the part. But if I edit the pivot here, and I just move this to the left side like that, and then I rotate it, then you can see it's rotating based on that side. So that's basically what that does. And then snap, that's just for if you want to snap the pivot to either side. You can see here I can just move it very freely, or if I want to snap to one side, then that's how I do that. And then if I want to reset it, that'll just make it jump back in the center. Alright, now a few more things up here. I know I kind of got carried away. We were supposed to be looking at the properties here, but we're just about done up here, so might as well finish looking at this stuff. So group, this is if I want to group multiple parts as a model. So if I just press Control D to duplicate this part, and then make sure I'm uncheck the edit pivot, and select the move tool, I can move it over here. Okay, and then say I wanted to move both these parts, or I want both of them to be kind of joined together. What I would do is just select both of them like that, using Control to select both, or I can just drag and select like that. And then if I pick the group option here, this will group both of them into a model. And what a model is, it's just basically a collection of parts. You can have more things in a model, but generally that's just all it is. It's just multiple parts grouped together. So now you can see I can move both of them at the same time. And then if I just want to undo that, so they're not a model, I can just press Control Z. You can also group them as a folder, so it'll just put them in a folder here instead of a model. But then you can see if I select one of them, it doesn't select both, it'll just select one or the other. So sometimes that's what you want. Actually, maybe you don't want to select both, maybe you just want to select one part. But then if I wanted to select both, I could just select the folder here, and that would do the same thing anyway. Then I can also pick ungroup, so that'll take them out of the folder or model. And it should do the same thing if I press the button here. Oh, no, actually it doesn't. So if you pick to group it, then the only way to ungroup it is just to pick that right there. And then lock. So lock will just make it so you can't interact with that part when you're editing it here in the workspace. So if I pick lock. Okay, so yeah, this will open up the lock tool actually. I usually don't lock things this way, so there's another way to lock things, but yeah, you can do it like this too. So you see the lock is unlocked, and then I click it and it's locked. So that's basically how that works. But now I have to go back to the lock tool and click it again, so it'll stop locking things. But now if I pick the select or the move tool, you can see I can select the base plate, but I can't select these parts anymore. And you can see I just moved the base plate there. So the base plate, actually you probably do want to lock usually. You don't want to be like dragging the base plate around usually. So I will go ahead and lock that. Just like that. And then click lock button again. And now you can see I can't select any of these parts unless I go over here. If you go over here, you can select them. You can see I can still drag it like this, but I just can't accidentally select it. And then I'll go ahead and, oh, interesting. So now it grouped it into multiple models. Okay, I didn't realize that. So if you keep picking group here, I guess it'll just keep making more and more models, which is probably not what you want. So to fix that, I'll just select both of these parts, and then I might be able to just pick ungroup, I'm not sure. Okay, you can see it ungrouped one of the models, but it just deleted one of the models pretty much. But if I want to get rid of all of it, then I'll just drag these parts to the workspace, and then I can just delete all those models. Okay, so yeah, I want to unlock these. So I'll show you the other way to lock things is just right here. This is generally how I prefer to lock them. It's just easier to me. So now they're unlocked and I can select them again. So now the last thing here anyway is anchor. So this just appears to be a toggle. It's unlike the lock tool where you click lock and then you click the part you want to lock. This just is a toggle. So I would just select all the parts I want to change the anchor property and then click it, and then it's changed. And you can see if they're anchored or not because it's highlighted gray here, so that means they're anchored. But what does the anchor mean? So if I leave it anchored right now and then I run the game, you can see they're floating in the air. And if I stop it and I anchor it again, okay, and then run it, and I'll just press F5 to run it, then you can see they have fallen to the floor now. So that's all the anchoring is really, is if you anchor it, the parts will stay exactly where they were. If you don't anchor it, then they can be moved around. So, and you can also change the anchor property here. So I'll go ahead and show you just side by side. I'll anchor one of them and then I won't anchor the other one. And I'll pick play. And you can see one of them has fallen and the other one hasn't. And then if this were a different kind of part, I could actually move this around, but since it's so flat, like a board, I can't really move it around. So I'll go ahead and just change it to a ball to show you this. And if I pick play, okay, I changed the wrong one. So that was the anchored one. So let me change the other one to a ball. And I'm gonna just make a spawn location here so I don't keep spawning in the air. Okay, there you can see. Yeah, it's almost a little bit too small to even roll around, but usually things will roll around if they're not anchored. So I can just change the size here real quick. If I just make it 10 by 10, and then I'll just move it out of the ground here. And still floating for some reason. Let me just try anchoring it. That's weird. Okay, there it goes. So now you can see I can just push this around. So that's pretty much all the anchoring does. So now I'm going to delete both of these parts. And I'm going to add in a new part. Up here, I'll just add in a new block. Okay, so now getting back to the properties here. So the brick color, we've already went over that. The shadow. So if I just uncheck that, then the part won't cast a shadow. And this will be affected by the lighting too. So if I change the time of day here, you can see the shadow changes too. And the color, yep, just the same thing. I could pick a screen color too if I want. So if I want it to be the color of this arrow, I could do that, for example. Then you can add custom colors here. So if I just like this color and then I want to add it, that way it'll save it. And the material, so this is very important. This is what the part is going to look like, what kind of material it's going to use. So here you can see, if I zoom in closely, this is the plastic material. And I'll go ahead and just start from the top. So it should be pretty self-explanatory, but I'll go ahead and just demo what all the materials look like here. So asphalt, that would be like a road or something. Basalt, that's some kind of salt or rock, I guess. Brick, cardboard, carpet, ceramic tiles, clay roof tiles, cobblestone, concrete, corroded metal, cracked lava, diamond plate, fabric, foil, force field. So this is an interesting one. This will be kind of transparent, and it'll kind of glow differently depending on the lighting and which direction you're looking at it from. Glacier. This doesn't look much like a glacier right now, but if I make it like a light blue color, like that, then you can see. Glass. Glass is one of the more unique properties or materials because it's one of the only ones you can have reflectance on. So I'll be going over that next, but let's just finish up here. Granite, grass. So you could even make just a big grass area. If you don't want to use the terrain grass, then you could use this. You just want to make sure you anchor it so the grass doesn't move around. there's some other differences between this grass and the terrain grass. The biggest difference would be like, I guess I would have to like get in the terrain editor to show you, but the terrain grass would behave more realistically, whereas this grass won't do anything really. It just kind of will look like this. So yeah, it's kind of hard to explain unless I actually get in and show you the terrain editor, but that'll be in a different video. Now, looking at the next material, ground. So this would be useful for like making some kind of dirt or mud. Ice, leafy grass, leather. Limestone, marble, metal. And the metal, you can see, looks very shiny. Not too sure why it looks that shiny, but then there's mud, neon. Neon is a pretty cool one. It'll make it very bright and glowy. It works best with certain colors. Like if you pick a really dark color, it's not going to really glow. But if you pick like a bright red or something, then it'll generally look a bit better. Pavement, pebble, plaster, plastic, rock, roof shingles, salt, sand, sandstone, smooth plastic. So this one is different than the plastic. So the plastic kind of has some little bumps in it, but then the smooth plastic is very good if you just want something to be completely smooth and not have really any reflectance or anything like that. Snow, wood planks, and that's pretty much it. So you can imagine you could make just about any kind of thing you could imagine with all these different materials and colors. Just about anything you could need, you can make with a part. And then the material variant. So I suppose I could show you this. Shouldn't take too long. So the material variant is if you want to change how a default material looks. So let me see if I can find a good example here. So I'll pick snow, and I'll just make it look like snow then. And then I'll just move it down here. Make it bigger. Okay, so now if I want to change this material, just say I want a snow material, but I don't like this one, then what I can do is go in here and actually I haven't used this in quite a while. Okay, I think, yeah, okay. We need to add a material variant here first, so that's how we do it. And then I'll go ahead and just open the toolbox, go to decals, and I'll find a snow texture, if there are any. Okay, like this one, for example, I could use this. I'll just right click and copy the asset ID, and then I'm going to paste that here in the color map. So the color map is just If you ever work with 3D modeling, then you probably already know this, but the color map is just the basic texture that gives it all its color and everything. The metalness map will give it sort of a metallic look, and the normal map will give it like some kind of edges, so it looks like it has more texture to it. And then the roughness just gives it roughness. But you need very specific textures for these to look right, so I'd have to make another tutorial or something, but honestly I'm not an expert on this stuff. But yeah, if you don't know what you're doing here, then just leave these blank and just use the color map. Okay, and then I'll just leave all these other settings how they are. And then I'm gonna go back here in material service, and I'll change the snow texture. So let me just name this real quick. So I'll just press F2 to name this, and I'll call this, I don't want to just call it snow because that's what the other one is called, so I'll call it new snow. And then when I go down here and select the snow, should have showed up here actually, I'm not sure why it didn't. Oh, okay. So here's what we forgot to do. So we need to pick the material that it's overriding. So instead of plastic, I'll just pick snow here. And then when I go back, now it should show up here. And now I can pick new snow. And you're going to see when I pick this, then it's going to change the snow here. So you can see now it's picking the new snow material. So that's how the material service works. And then I can change the scale of it here. So if I want it smaller or bigger. I'm not too sure what this does. I guess it'll just kind of, if you pick organic, it'll kind of change the size of it based on what shape it is, I guess. But yeah, so that's how the material service works. So now looking back at our part here. So that's what the material variant is. Oh, and I can even change it here. So I guess if I pick plastic and then I pick new snow, it'll just overwrite it. Oh, okay. So I have to have the material selected here, otherwise it'll say it doesn't match. So it has to be the same basic kind of material. Okay, and then the reflectance. So that only works with a few different kinds of materials, like the glass. There might be one other one I'm forgetting, but pretty much it only works with glass. Oh. Okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure if that was like having some effect on it. Kind of looked weird to me, but so here's the glass material, and the unique thing with this is you can change the reflectancy. So at 0 it won't reflect at all, and then at 1 it'll reflect the sky. So it'll kind of show the sky inside of the part. So that's what that does. And then transparency, it's pretty obvious. If you have it fully transparent, you won't be able to see it at all. And that can be done with any kind of material, not just the glass. And then archivable. So I guess if you uncheck that, then you wouldn't be able to archive it. I'm not entirely sure how you would even archive it, but I would just always leave that checked unless you have a reason not to. And then locked, we already went over that, so if I lock it, then I can't select it anymore. And then the name, pretty much every object will let you rename it if you want. So I could just call this snow if I want to. And then the parent is the workspace. Right now, I can change the parent. So if I change the parent to the server storage, it's just going to move it to the server storage. And you can see it's in here now. And if I change it back to the workspace, then it's back here. Okay, almost done. There's only a few more properties here. So here's the size. So the size is a vector 3 value, which means it has a x, y, and z value. So I can, as you saw before, I can change that by dragging it like this, but I can also do it in here by just changing these values. So that's how that works. And the position is the same thing. It's a vector 3. So I can change that here as well. If I just put in 0, it's just going to put 0 for everything, and I'll put it back here. If I put 10, then it's going to put 10 for all of them, or I can just do them one by one here. And then the origin position, from my understanding, this is if you change the position of the part later in the game while the game is running, then it would only update this position, but this position would be the same. So you could get the origin position of it. At least that's my understanding of it, but I've never used this property before. The orientation, so that's just the rotation of it. So you can see if I rotate it here, the numbers over here is changing. And then I can also just change it like that. Pivot offset. I've never used this before, but I'm guessing it just changes the pivot right here. So if I set this to 1, yeah, you can see it's just changing the pivot location here. And then you can change the orientation of the pivot as well. Fluid forces. This is a new property. I'm not entirely sure what this does. So I'm just leaving it checked for now. Can collide. This is very important. Should be obvious what this does, but just in case, I'll go ahead and explain it. So if I just run the game right now, and you can see the can collide is checked. So I'll just pick play here. And then I walk into the part here. You can see I collide with it. But then if I turn off can collide, and then I try and go through it, you can see I can walk right through it. So that's what the can collide does. So you either want to have something anchored or have can collide on it. If I don't have both of them, then it's just gonna... Okay, you can see it actually didn't unanchor it, even though I checked it. So I'm guessing that's because we're on the client. But if I go to the server here, then it should be able to unanchor it. Yeah, you can see it's still anchored on the server here. So that's why it's important to know the difference between the client and server. Some things you might just want to only affect the client, but some things you need to go to the server here. So if I unanchor it here and the can collide is off, it's just going to fall right through the world. And then you can see it got destroyed. So you either want to have it anchored or you want to have can collide on. Unless you just want a part that is just going to fall right through the world. Can query. So I'm not entirely sure what that does. But okay, you can see it says here determines whether a part is considered there in spatial query operations. I have no idea what that does, so I'll just leave it alone then. Can touch. This is very important. You're going to be using this a lot of the time with different scripts and things like that. But basically what it does is there's an event with all parts, and it's called the can touch event. But what it is basically is if a player, or it doesn't even have to be a player, but if any other part touches that part, it'll run this can touch event. So by default, it won't do anything, but if you were to script it to make it do something, then that's how that would happen. So if you uncheck this, then you won't be able to use that event, basically. So an example of this would be, let's say we have some crack lava here. Like this, and I'll just make it bigger just so it looks a bit better. And make it some kind of red color, like that. So then what I can do here is, so this will be some scripting, so if you're not sure what's going on here, I'll try and explain it, but this isn't really supposed to be a scripting tutorial, but I'll just do script.parent equals local part equals script.parent. So what that's doing is it's just defining the part here, and then I'll say part.touched, and this is that touched event. So what I could do here is, I usually just call this hit, but you can just call this whatever you want. So this will get the part that touched it, and then if hit.parent find first child humanoid, so this will check if it's a player. Then I'll do hit dot humanoid take damage, and then I'll put in 10 amount of damage here. So this should hopefully work. Now if I run it and make sure I have can touch checked, and I run it right here, and let me just go to output to make sure I didn't. Okay, so I did mess something up. Okay, it happens all the time. So even though I probably have 1,000 hours in Roblox Studio, but just mistakes are bound to happen eventually. Okay, so let's see. I'm not actually sure what went wrong here. Okay, I see the problem now. So the humanoid property is not in the part, it is in the character, so we need to do .parent. So that'll get the character of that'll get the player's character. Okay, then we touch it, and you can see it's hurting me now. And now it has killed me. And this only triggers if you move. Like you can see, if I'm right here and I just don't move at all, then the event won't fire. But once I start moving, it's going to hurt me. And then I move again, it'll hurt me a bit more. But now if I go in here to the server and I disable the can touch, and then I go back and I move, you can see it doesn't hurt me anymore because that event is completely disabled. So it wouldn't matter whatever I have here. If the can't touch is disabled, then that won't run. So that's what the can't touch does. And a pro tip is that if you don't need the can't touch event, then just always disable it, because it does, I notice it causes just a bit of lag if all the parts are kind of touching each other and the event is firing. So even if you don't have this script here, I believe it can still cause lag. So even if we completely delete that, just the fact that we have this can't touch enabled, in my experience, has caused some lag. But I mean, you need to have like hundreds of parts here we're talking about, like, before you would ever really notice. But let's just say you had like hundreds of parts all touching each other like that. And again, the event doesn't fire if they're just touching. So like, let's just say I have a part here. It's not just going to be firing nonstop here. It would only be firing if like the part was moving. Then it would keep firing it. But yeah, if you don't need this can't touch event, just always disable it, just to help your performance, even if it might be just very minor. Collision group. So this is if you want to make different collision groups. This is kind of a more advanced thing, but I'll try and cover it briefly. So if I go to the Models tab here, and then go to Collision Groups, so this will make it so only a certain kind of part can collide with another kind of part. So if I add this, everything will be in the default collision group by default, and then it seems to be a new option here. Yeah, this is, I can make a whole tutorial on this. This is kind of a more advanced thing, but all you need to know is that if you only want certain parts to collide with other certain parts, then you can just make a collision group for them, and that would be how you would do that. So the most common way you would use that is if you don't want the player to collide with another player, you could assign all the parts of the player a collision group and then make it so they don't collide with each other. So yeah, that's pretty much what collision groups are. And looking down here at the rest of the stuff, anchored, we already went over that. Okay, then physical properties. So this will change the way the physics in the game works. So if the part falls, or if it has any kind of physical, like physics-based thing on it, like a velocity, angular velocity or linear velocity, things like that, then you want to keep in mind what kind of properties it has here. But if it's something that's just going to stay stationary and not really do anything, then you don't even need to worry about it. And then you can pick custom physical properties. If you don't check that, it'll just base the properties based on what kind of material it is. So if I change it something like rock, for example, is going to be much heavier than plastic and things like that. So that's what that's for. Root party, I actually don't know what that does, but okay, then assembly. This is another physics thing, so this will just make it, this will give it some physics. This isn't really supposed to be a physics tutorial, but just basically, if I put a value in here and then I I'll just run the game with no player. You can see how it kind of floated up. So that's what the assembly velocity is. So this will just apply like a one-time velocity to the part when it spawns in. Okay, and then lastly, the last thing to look at up here is union, intersect, negate, and that sort of thing. So if I just make two parts here, let's say I want to join these parts together for whatever reason. So you know how before we could do them, we could join them like a model. I could group them here as a model, and then that way I can move both of them. And you can see they're both in here. But what if I want both the parts to be just one part? So they're not grouped in any special way, they're just actually one part. So that's what the union is for. And now you can see they're one part. There's no folder or anything. I can move them both together. So actually a good example of this, if I just pick a different material here, let's say I have the pavement here, and then I'm going to align it so it snaps up properly. Okay, you see this? How these bricks aren't, the texture doesn't look right here. You see the bricks kind of not really connecting. But then if I do this, wait, I think I did something wrong. Okay, we had an extra part in here for some reason. Okay, let's try this again now. So select both parts and then union it. And now you can see the texture looks right and everything like that. So that's what the union would be useful for, or if you just don't want like a ton of parts to be in your workspace, right? This will just make it easier to just access it. It's just one part. Intersect. So this will just be easier just to show you what it does rather than trying to explain it. If I just intersect these parts here, and then I select both of them, and I pick intersect, it's going to create only the part where they intersect. So you can see this is the part that they're touching. It's only this part right here that's touching. So that's what that'll do. And then negate. I haven't used this too much, but it's for making holes apparently. So yeah, I'm not actually sure how you use this. I've never needed it, but like say you wanted to make a hole in a part. I'm not sure if you have to select the part first or not. Let me just try doing it here. Yeah, I'm not sure if you need to select both of them or not. Let me try making it a bit bigger. And then I'll pick negate. Yeah, let me go ahead and run it. See what it does. Oh, okay, I'll do play here. Yeah, I'm not too sure how to use it. But yeah, that's all I know is it's for making holes. And then separate. Okay, so that would be if you have two parts and then you want to separate them. So like, say we have the union here again. I'll just make both these into a union again. And then say I want to ununion them, then that's what the separate is for. Alright, so that's pretty much it for parts. I know it was really long, but parts are really important. You need to know everything about them, really. They're going to be in pretty much any kind of game that you'd want to make. So it's important to know how they work. But that pretty much covers everything to do with parts. So yeah, I hope you learned something.